Hello there, you are listening to The Screen Queen, where you'll be finding your favorite movie or your favorite television show and learning something new. You'll just have to listen to find out. Here is your host, Samantha Parrish. Hello there and welcome to Alien August. So it makes sense that I did anime and then anniversaries and action. This has now been one of the most anticipated ideas that I have done. When I shared this idea with my friends, they were instantly giving me alien movies that they love and going through the motions. So I accidentally just happened to probe around the right idea. And you know, there's no way around talking about alien films without one of the most famous and cultural phenomenons that we can't get rid of no matter how hard we try or bury the cartridges in the desert, E.T. the Extraterrestrial. So I have to confess, as a self-proclaimed media queen, E.T. is not one of my favorite movies. I respect it, I love it for other people, but it didn't grab me as a child. It didn't really gravitate towards me as an adult. I just knew it was there, mostly because look what Steven Spielberg did around the corner many times until his own disclosure day. It works for a lot of people, and I'm so glad that it does. It's not hard to see that this was a film that really paved the way for other alien movies to come through. It definitely has to be given credit that not many films get the honor, and at least a good honor, of being the logo and advertisement for a company. It's a very prestigious way about it. And I think it's just a heartwarming story that people weren't sure wasn't going to be scary. Even candy companies did not know if this film was going to be okay, and now there's no way to escape its success. But even though it is a great alien film, and I have to admit, yes, it is a great alien film, it's a great childhood film where it can go hand in hand with having an adventure, but feeling for these kids on their adventure. There are so many films that can do that and just not even try, but E.T. just went a little bit further and made something that identifies for years and years and years to come. And that's kind of one of the main reasons we love movies, to not only be entertained by them, but how they stay with us. And clearly E.T. has had a very strong stay with many people. It's still hard to believe that this film is 44 years old and has still found a way to still make the magic. And well, that's what we're here to talk about. So get yourself ready, because we're about to jump into the spaceship that has E.T. So the best place to start is the person who made the story happen. Steven, I don't know what you did with Disclosure Day, Spielberg. The idea he got for E.T. was originally called Night Skies, and it was from Steven Spielberg's childhood imaginary friend. So when Steven Spielberg was a young boy, his parents were going through a divorce. Even though that would go on to be a common trope in many of his films, here it feels the most poignant because it's mostly autobiographical. This is straight from the trauma that he was just working through when his parents divorced, because of course it's going to hit you in the gut of knowing your life is officially altered. And that's when he had a imaginary friend that got him through everything that occurred through the divorce. So you're starting to see where the molding is coming for this to be Elliot Taylor and E.T. But when Steven Spielberg went to go write the story, this wasn't the story you got. It wasn't the young boy that was going through a lot of shit in life and ends up finding an alien. It had more of a darker tone. And that's where the real hero comes in, Melissa Matheson, who took a look at this film and went, I think we can change it up. So it went from revisions. It went from Night Skies to the possibility of being called E.T. and Me, which, wonder if that's going to become an idea in 1988. And they went through a couple of rewrites and finally found E.T. the Extraterrestrial is going to be a story about a young boy that has the most out-of-this-world adventure. And oh boy, was that good that was the final product, because what if it was the other product? We wouldn't be still talking about how this film is an icon for Amblin Entertainment or has been in the hearts and minds of many, many children. Some things really do get saved by editing, and I think his good friend George Lucas would know. And it was the highest grossing film of all time and held for 11 years until a little prehistoric movie came out called Jurassic Park. And to top it all off, the year after Jurassic Park came out, E.T. was inducted into the National Film Registry, which, you know, they have to have things that are culturally, historically, or aesthetically significant. Well, I mean, E.T. had all of those things. So I guess he'll be right there. So one of the biggest questions I probably never asked about this movie is, who exactly is playing E.T.? And I found out that it's actually 2 ways that they got E.T. on the screen. One is from a 2 foot 10 inches stuntman that was able to just do most of the puppetry and mechanisms and stuff. But the scenes in the kitchen was done by a 12-year-old boy who was born without legs, but was an expert on walking with his hands. Oh, and if you've ever wondered where E.T.'s voice comes from, even though the voice sounds so sweet and very otherworldly, well, it's by Pat Welsh, an elderly woman, and she smoked 2 packets of cigarettes a day, which gave her the exact tone that the filmmakers wanted to have for the character. When you think about a voice for a character, it usually sounds very layered, or it sounds like it's non-existent or another language. Nope, this one is just a chain smoker. Have you ever thought about the idea of just an alien that sounded like a chain smoker? But there is more to the lore of E.T. Steven Spielberg, being one of the people that brought E.T. to life, has the entire history of what is correct about this character. And he was asked, what gender is E.T.? Because you think on top of your head, oh, it's him, right? But since technically E.T. isn't human, gender doesn't exactly have a correct definition or even a definition at all. But Steven Spielberg has confirmed to say that E.T. is male nor female. So they're non-binary, right? I don't know. Because the fact that E.T. is an alien, you can play around with the gender spectrum, so there's not really a wrong answer here. But Steven Spielberg also added that this is technically a plant-like creature. And when I watched the movie when I was younger, I sensed a big nature vibe. When you think of a lot of alien films, it's immediately decorated with futuristic themes, but E.T. is just sort of one with the planet wherever they go. And having this connection, it does make this feel like a more non-threatening creature. Like, this isn't like Signs, where the aliens came to a planet that was going to kill them, but they wanted to take it over. But no, it's just a scared alien far away from home that just ends up bonding with a little boy. And adding on to that, E.T. has also been confirmed by the novelization that they are over 10 million years old. Now think about that in 1982. To think of something that's 10 million years old and now add more time on to that, if E.T. were to exist, E.T. will still be around. It'll be Keith Richards, the cockroaches, and E.T. So the one thing that's funny about E.T. is that you could throw a dart or take a shot for how many times Star Wars has some aforementioned or literal mention or presentation in the movie. I mean, it was like that in this other film that came out the same year, Poltergeist, so there was no escaping the Star Wars. But this one is a little bit more hilarious when you see a little bit of how they sprinkled in the Star Wars. There is a kid in a Yoda costume that is seen, and you can hear a snippet of Yoda's theme in the background from The Empire Strikes Back that, you know, was done by Steven Spielberg's music boy, John Williams, who has done pretty much everything. So E.T. was just a footnote in his giant music resume of Steven Spielberg, or just in general. But also, it goes a little bit further than that. Harrison Ford is seen in different versions of the movie. He filmed a cameo role as Elliot's schoolmaster, school headmaster. And also it kind of helped that Melissa Matheson, who wrote the movie, was Harrison Ford's girlfriend at the time. So, connections, you know, what can you say? Harrison Ford did agree to it. because most of the adult characters up at that point, his face wouldn't be seen. It'd be like it kind of has like a Peanuts idea that the adults are very ambiguous because it's in the eyes of a child. And most of this film is presented to feel like the eyes of a child, where it's directly at a child's eye length. So it wouldn't have a Danny DeVito look where everything feels so in your face or very threatening or dramatic. It's just the presence of a child in general, and all the adults just exist as they are in the child's world, just at another different stance. So besides dating the writer and being a part of Star Wars to make that in-joke work, it is kind of hilarious that Harrison Ford is presented in the movie. But the scene didn't come out until 1996, so this lay dormant. Imagine a lot of E.T. fans that were not expecting to find Han Solo just casually cameoing in the movie. And then there was that little sneaky tactic in the Halloween scene when E.T. sees a child in a Yoda costume and seems to recognize him. Like, hey, what are you doing here? Feels very Third Rock from the Sun, like aliens finding aliens. And then, funny enough, George Lucas returned the joke in The Phantom Menace when the various senators are calling out. You can see E.T.'s species just chilling among the Senate pods in the lower right-hand corner. Well, at least that joke fares better than when Critters did it in their film. Oh, that very, very poor E.T. plushie. So when you look at this movie, you would think it's won everything right. But this movie did not win for Best Picture. It lost to Ghandi. Having to say that Ghandi beat an alien movie is a very, very strange sentence to have to say. And one of the actors in the movie was Lord Richard Attenborough, who would eventually go star as Hammond in Jurassic Park. And at the time, when the films were being presented, he knew Ghandi had nothing in comparison to E.T., for how different it was, how it's presented. And when you look at these two films together, a lot of people would probably vote E.T. more than Ghandi. And for the actor himself being in the film to have to say that there's no way that Ghandi is going to win against E.T. for how extraordinary it looks. And he was convinced during the ceremony that E.T. was going to win. So imagine when Ghandi wins, he's like, yay, what? Wait, what? He was so impressed by it, and impressed by his friend Steven Spielberg, that he has called E.T., and I quote, a quite extraordinary piece of cinema. And to think that is from a man that would eventually go on to play the most irresponsible grandfather ever created in cinema in Jurassic Park 11 years later. Because time's funny that way. Oh, so if you've ever wondered what in the world made the noise to make E.T.'s footsteps sound like it's just stepping on tomatoes over and over and over again, well, it is food related. It's actually a wet t-shirt crammed with Jell-O to simulate the noise of the squishy walk that he does. So think about that. Every time that you watch E.T., you're listening to Jell-O and a t-shirt. You're welcome. Oh, so funny enough, a while ago when I did the episode Splash, I had shared a piece of trivia about how the film was shown to former President Ronald Reagan. Well, turns out that it wasn't entirely the first film ever shown to a president, but this was personally screened by Spielberg himself. The other film was just happened to be picked. You know, I just thought, why not? But no, E.T. had the hand-delivered one. Steven Spielberg said, Ronald, do you want to take a look at this one? That's a lot of power there. So one of my favorite moments of E.T., and probably one of the most iconic, is E.T. among the toys. And then that, of course, makes people want to recreate that with their own pets and have that moment happen. But that moment is actually thanks to Robert Zemeckis, who has worked with Steven Spielberg on many things. They go back and forth, they collaborate, they make a lot of good things happen. He had a dream about the mother going in the closet and finding E.T. among the toys. And Robert Zemeckis pitched it, and Steven Spielberg wasn't going to say no to a good idea, and it was kept for the movie. And to think that was created by the guy who would eventually go on to go make Romancing the Stone, Back to the Future, Who Framed Roger Rabbit, Flight, the list goes on. So one thing about E.T. is it has many interpretations, but one of the main definitions that is given by Steven Spielberg is that it represents the suburban dreams. Because the other film that he was helping out with, a little cursed film called Poltergeist, that had a heavy hand involvement with Steven Spielberg while it was directed by Tobe Hooper, and he went on to say that that film is the suburban nightmare. And since both of those films came out, it's sort of like the way 1988 was the big year that had the back-to-back anime films that had to do with war, like Akira and My Neighbor Totoro and Grave of the Fireflies, all having to do with war, but in different definitions, just like Poltergeist and E.T. had some definition and effect on the suburbia at the time. But funny enough, speaking more about the definitions, many have suggested that this has elements of Christianity. When looking at it, it's kind of more in the spiritual realm, since E.T. is considered a plant-like creature that doesn't have anything to do with religion or whatever. E.T. is just E.T. He's just there. And Steven Spielberg has said that there is no way and no how there would be any Christian themes because his devout Jewish mother would never forgive him. And that does sound like something a devout Jewish mother would say. But if you know Jewish culture, they'd be like, oh, no, don't you dare, don't mix the two together. So it is kind of beautiful to have a film that is very wholesome, but doesn't have to have every single symbolism and meaning to go the extra steps and the extra layers. It just exists as it is. But funny enough, there is a little bit of a parallel for the little girls of the Spielberg production between Poltergeist and E.T. Drew Barrymore was constantly forgetting her lines. And I mean, she's 6 years old and giving it her all, and sometimes you can't just put too much pressure on children. You know, children are children. And it was annoying the hell out of Steven Spielberg, to the point that he yelled at her, only to find out that she was sick when she came to production, and that's why she was forgetting her lines, because she just wasn't feeling well. So he took it upon himself to comfort Drew Barrymore and say he shouldn't have outbursted like he did, and made sure she was okay, and sent her home with a letter to her parents that said, I didn't know she was sick, and I hurt her feelings, and I want her to take care of herself. Please make sure that there's no ill will. Like, it's a nice sentiment. And you can also see that sentiment being displayed in the film. Henry Thomas made her a get well card when he heard that she wasn't feeling well, and because these kids got along so well, Drew Barrymore kept the card with her, and it is still in her hand during one of the scenes. On Poltergeist, it was a hell of a thing where Heather O'Rourke literally got the shit scared out of her, to the point that Steven Spielberg was like, what the fuck is wrong with me? I got one kid traumatized by yelling at her, and I got another kid traumatized for giving it her all. This was not a good year for those kids in production, but at least Steven Spielberg was nice enough to amend being an ass about it, and wanted these kids to keep giving their all, to do what they can, and it really does show for the genuine performances of both Drew Barrymore and Heather O'Rourke. This man deserves a lot of awards, but the fact that there should be a special award for consoling little girls needs to be there somewhere. And it really did help, because Drew Barrymore and Heather O'Rourke did a fantabulous job in both of the films that came out in 1982. But in E.T.'s case, Drew Barrymore's was carried very much further, because at 6 years old, she really believed that E.T. was an alien. She believed him so well that the way she talks to E.T. became one of the big magical parts of the movie. And Steven Spielberg did whatever he could to keep that imagination going, even making sure that there were puppeteers operating the E.T. prop so she could still interact, and it keeps the imagination going. But unfortunately, Drew Barrymore did find the section where the puppeteers had E.T., because, you know, she's sick. She thinks it's great. She's going to follow it, and just had no idea she was going to discover that. So with Steven Spielberg not wanting that illusion to be ruined, he thought of an explanation, that all of these different types of E.T. dolls are there to help E.T. acclimate with the language and communication, to have things that look like E.T. to help him out, to still make that imagination feel real. And she's 6, so she bought it. Between her emotional goodbye at the end and when she says to E.T. and says, "I don't like his feet," and it was ad-libbed, it really is a charm that 6-year-old Drew Barrymore did bring. And as much as she's had a great career and a roller coaster of a life, the humble beginnings that she had in E.T. is really great. And as a little additive, she even got to keep the iconic red cowboy hat that her character wore for Halloween as a souvenir, and it's in her daughter's room. So E.T. does have a place in her life even to this day. So when you think about E.T., you think about it being an iconic, one-of-a-kind movie. Well, that wasn't until 1988, until one of the weirdest jokes was ever made called Mac and Me, which was made to be inspired by E.T., but then felt like an inferior ripoff of E.T. And oh yeah, it definitely shows, for sure. The inspiration is there, but the charm, the heart, the John Williams, it's not there. But Steven Spielberg was asked why there was never any legal action towards something that really did feel like they just hit cut, copy, paste. And Steven Spielberg said, and I quote, "I didn't want to be responsible for making people curious to watch it. You know, for someone to have to say, listen, that looks terrible, and I'm just gonna be in my bubble and let people just do what they want to on their own terms. That's kind of nice that someone isn't going to go so far." I think the only good thing about Mac and Me is that it's a constant joke on Paul Rudd's career in a good spirit, because it's not exactly an original material, but it's not exactly a threat to the material either. Oh, and by the way, since we just had a movie about a certain singer named Michael Jackson, and around that time, that was Michael Jackson's biggest year, Steven Spielberg did ask Michael Jackson and Quincy Jones to contribute a song for the E.T. the Extraterrestrial storybook album. And they made a song called Someone in the Dark. But unfortunately, Someone in the Dark had a bit of a hard time existing. What was going on during Thriller coming out, and there was conditions, and there was a breach of contract, and it was a sticky legal mess. And to think that was just one creative person asking another to make a song, and then all of that had to happen. But the audiobook did garner a huge success and got Michael Jackson a Grammy Award in 1984 for Best Recording for Children. And the singer had stated, out of all the awards that he had gotten that night, that one was the one he was most proud of. I mean, think about it. Michael Jackson has won awards after awards after awards after awards, even posthumously. But the E.T. audiobook album that he did the song for has the most special place in his heart. Michael Jackson even got to own one of the puppets from E.T. I hope it's with his kids or with Neverland, because that's too precious. But funny enough, there was another musical contribution to this movie. James Taylor wrote a song intended for E.T. called Song for You Far Away. And unfortunately, as we all know, we do not see that song in the movie because it was never used in the movie. But it was eventually used on his That's Why I'm Here album. So he has to tell everybody, so I didn't use this for E.T., but here it is anyway. So to kind of wrap things up, there was going to be a sequel to E.T. Can you think about a sequel to one of the most perfect films ever made? That even people that don't like it would absolutely be like, you know what, did a good job. Yeah, that film does not need to be touched by a sequel. But there was an attempt to make a sequel. And the plot sounds a little, Jewel of the Nile to Romancing the Stone. Very much derived and deprived of the beautiful story that we got. The story they put together was that Elliot and his family are kidnapped by hostile aliens, and E.T., who is, as said to be 10 million years old, is named Shrek, okay, sure, and rescues them. Steven Spielberg had said that the story that he told was perfect in its own way and does not need a continuation. Would you really want to see something that feels so much like a perfect ending that you don't need to think of a what if? You just kind of have the story in your heart and know that these characters are going to be okay and know that E.T. will always be right here. That's what they said in the movie. I'm sure he wouldn't think like, what? I gotta save this family that I'm never gonna see again? I'm sorry, but for an alien like E.T. that is very much a peaceful character, and you're basically going to make E.T. be like Bruce Willis in Die Hard and go save his family? That's like if everyone from the 100 Acres was kidnapped and it was up to Piglet. Like that sounds so strange. It feels like a very forced cash grab, but it wasn't far from Steven Spielberg's mind to do a sequel. He did toy around with it. I feel like every writer at some point does think, well, what if it did continue? What would it look like? And he spitballed to think about making the focus on E.T.'s homeworld, to do more of the continuation to that, not making, well, whatever the hell that proposed sequel was. If we need to have a sequel to E.T., it should come from the person himself that knows the story, the lore, the layers, everything about it. And if there were to be a continuation, it would have to be in E.T.'s home world to expand on the E.T. universe. But he did think if that would ever come to fruition, then the original film would lose its shine. It wouldn't exactly be too dulled, but there would be an association of a sequel that didn't need to happen. And honestly, I do feel like that's a good place to wrap up. It's a film that is perfect on its own to exist as a harmless alien story with such awe and wonder and whimsy, something that doesn't feel sullied by the age, but feels more improved by its age. The way that this film has not only touched the childhoods of many people watching this movie, but the people that were involved with the movie, the people that just wanted to give their dreams to this movie. Everyone had good vibes coming off of E.T. and became like this symbolism of hope in a way. And then again, I mentioned earlier, E.T. is just kind of chilling. E.T. just exists along for the ride, being the accidental inclusion into this kid that has divorced parents and is just trying to vibe through life and get through it, and this alien does end up helping him get through it in his own way. It doesn't feel like it's spoon-feeding you comfort and answers. It's more like it was like a comforting adventure, a gentle hug on the shoulders, just like it's a breeze on the bicycle, just going through it. You feel like you're on the adventure right there with Elliot. You feel for E.T. when they're dying. You feel for E.T. when they go. Something that makes you feel is doing something right as a movie. No matter what world a story comes from, no matter what mind it comes from, the fact that it came together truly is out of this world. So that concludes the first episode of Alien August on the Screen Queen. And I had a lot of fun learning about E.T., getting to know more than I ever expected to find out, and it makes me appreciate the movie a little bit more than I did before. And I had a great time sharing all of those tidbits, and I'm gonna have even more fun with the next episode that, it's definitely not gonna be whimsy, but it's definitely gonna be interesting. So stay tuned for next week's episode. Until then, you can catch up with me on my Instagram at the Queen of the Screen if you have any recommendations or you want to tell me your own favorite scene from E.T. And you can catch the show on Apple, Spotify, YouTube, anywhere. And don't forget, I'll be right here. This is your Screen Queen, signing off. Bye-bye!